I followed my wife one night, wearing a mask so she wouldn't recognize me. What I saw when she walked into that private room, I'll never forget. I've been married to my wife, Amanda, for just shy of 10 years. If you looked at us from the outside, you'd probably think we had it all together. Decent jobs, a cozy home, no kids yet, which meant plenty of time for each other. But over the past several months, something started to shift between us, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. Looking back, the changes began around 6 months ago. Amanda's always had this wild, independent streak, something I really admired about her. She was spirited, full of life, and never one to be boxed in. But slowly, that independence started turning into distance. She stopped telling me the small stuff, how her day went, who she talked to, the funny things that used to make her laugh out loud and then retell to me at night. Instead, she began brushing off my questions with vague replies or a quick peck on the cheek, like it was enough to satisfy my curiosity. At first, I figured it was just a rough patch. We all have them, right? But it didn't stop there. It got worse, noticeably worse. Amanda used to leave her phone lying around wherever, on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, never once guarded about it. But suddenly it never left her hand. And she was going out more, saying she had plans with work friends or needed some time with the girls. I didn't question it at first. After all, we'd built a foundation on trust, and I had no reason to doubt her, or so I thought. But beneath all that, something inside me felt off. There was a quiet unease I couldn't shake. That's when the late nights began. She started saying she was staying late at work or hitting the gym after hours, but her timelines didn't add up. Sometimes she wouldn't come home until long after she said she would, and her explanations felt rehearsed, hollow. I wanted to believe her so badly. Every time I heard the door open, my chest would tighten, bracing for either relief or another round of half-answers. It was that creeping sense, the kind that settles into your bones, telling you something's happening behind your back, and it's only a matter of time before it comes to light. And yet, I had no idea just how deep the truth went. Even with all the red flags waving in front of me, I kept brushing it off. I told myself I was just overanalyzing, maybe imagining things. But that gut feeling, that sense that the person I loved was slipping away, it never left me. And then one night, everything started to unravel. Amanda had told me she was having dinner with some coworkers. No big deal, or at least that's what I tried to believe. But by 11 p.m. she still wasn't home. I called, no response. Texted, nothing. I just sat there on the couch, phone in hand, the silence in the room louder than any alarm. When she finally walked in just after midnight, she looked flustered, like she'd been rushing. I asked her why she hadn't answered her phone. She told me it died. Simple as that. But the way she said it, it didn't sit right. It felt flimsy. That wasn't the Amanda I knew. The woman I married would have at least sent a quick message if she could. I didn't confront her right then, but something inside me shifted. A quiet voice whispered, "She's not being honest." The next day, driven by a mix of fear and desperation, I went through her phone. I hated myself for doing it. That's not the kind of husband I ever wanted to be, the snooping, distrustful kind. But I needed something, anything, that could explain what was going on. I didn't find much. If anything, it was too clean. Messages were either missing or so generic they felt like they were written for an audience. Amanda was careful. Too careful. But that's when I found the receipt, a tiny slip of paper in her purse that nearly knocked the air out of me. It was from a bar I knew she didn't usually go to, and dated the same night she was supposedly out with coworkers. My heart just sank. It wasn't exactly proof, but it was enough to light a fire in my gut. I didn't confront her right away. Instead I watched. Waited. Hoping it was a one-time thing that maybe I'd misunderstood. But I couldn't shake the image of that receipt. It clung to me like a weight I couldn't drop. And things just kept piling up from there. It wasn't one big explosion. It was a series of small moments that built up until I couldn't ignore them anymore. The lies, the changes in her behavior, it all started to add up. And suddenly, I was living with someone I barely recognized. The clothes were the next clue. Amanda started dressing differently, more makeup, tighter outfits. At first, I figured she just wanted to feel confident, maybe mix things up. But it was different. It was like she was putting on a show, and I wasn't the one in the front row. One night, while she was showering, I sat in our bedroom and stared at her side of the closet. All those new clothes, heels she'd never worn before, dresses that looked like they belonged to someone else entirely. I remember thinking, who is she dressing for? It felt like I was standing in a stranger's home, not my own. And then there were the constant outings, always a new reason to be out late. A dinner, a workout, a work event. But every time she left, I had this aching sense in my chest that she was heading off into a life I wasn't part of. That she was living a second story, one I wasn't even written into. That was when I finally started facing the questions I'd been trying to avoid. Was Amanda seeing someone else? Could she really be unfaithful? Just the thought of it made me feel physically ill. It was like my entire world had flipped upside down, and I didn't know which way was up anymore. Still, I wasn't ready to confront her, not without something undeniable. A gut feeling and a suspicious receipt weren't enough. I needed something concrete. Something that couldn't be explained away. And then, almost like fate had had enough of watching me suffer, an opportunity fell right into my lap. Amanda had told me she had another girls' night planned. Normally, I would have just stayed home, pretending I was okay, pretending I believed her. But not this time. I told her I had to work late, that I wouldn't be home until after midnight. That was a lie. I wasn't headed to work. I was following her. And guess where she ended up? That same bar again. Only she wasn't meeting co-workers. She wasn't with friends. She was meeting someone else. That night changed everything. After trailing her to that bar, I realized I had only seen the tip of the iceberg. Something deeper was going on and I needed to get to the bottom of it, but carefully. I couldn't risk tipping her off too soon. Not yet. A few nights later, my friend Mike texted me, asking if I wanted to grab a drink. At first, I was going to turn him down. I wasn't exactly in a social mood. But then I figured maybe getting out for a bit could help me clear my head. And maybe, just maybe, talking with Mike could help me process what I'd seen without giving too much away. We went to this place across town. It wasn't the same bar Amanda had gone to, but it had a similar feel. Dim lighting, loud music, and a crowd full of people looking to forget whatever weighed them down. We grabbed a booth, ordered a couple beers, and I tried to act like everything was fine. For a while, I actually started to relax. Mike was chatting about work, telling some ridiculous story, and for a moment, it felt good to just be out. But then, something caught my eye, and my world stopped again. I was looking toward the dance floor when I saw a woman who looked exactly like Amanda. At first, I thought it had to be someone else. She had told me she was working late that night, and this bar wasn't anywhere near where she said she'd be. But the way she moved, the way she laughed, it was her. No mistaking it. She was dancing, carefree, and surrounded by a group of men who clearly couldn't take their eyes off her. Watching her like she was the center of the universe. And the way she was moving, it wasn't just playful. It felt staged, like she was putting on a show. A show that wasn't meant for me. My stomach twisted into knots. Mike must have noticed the look on my face because he leaned in and asked, "Hey man, you okay?" I couldn't even answer. I was frozen, eyes locked on Amanda. Then she did something that shattered what was left of my denial. She grabbed one of the guys by the hand and led him off the dance floor toward a hallway in the back. Above the hallway was a glowing neon sign. I couldn't read what it said, but I saw her open a door and slip inside, with him. Without thinking, I jumped up. Mike looked confused. "Where are you going?" he called after me, but I was already pushing through the crowd. I had to see what was behind that door. As I got close, a big guy, security I guess, stepped in front of me like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Private room," he said firmly. "You're not allowed back there." My heart was hammering in my chest. I tried to keep calm. "Listen, that woman who just went in there, that's my wife." He didn't even blink. "Sorry? Not my problem." Everything in me wanted to shove past him, to see with my own eyes what she was doing in that room. But the way he stood, arms crossed, feet planted, it was clear he wasn't going to move. I wasn't getting through him. So I did the only thing I could. I walked away. I returned to the booth where Mike sat, clearly stunned by whatever he'd just witnessed. I grabbed my coat, muttered something about not feeling well, and left the bar. I don't remember much about the drive home. My mind was a storm. What was Amanda doing in that room? Who was the guy? And what kind of place has private rooms guarded by bouncers? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by what I'd seen, and what I hadn't. I knew then that whatever Amanda was caught up in, it wasn't just a fling. It was something darker. Something bigger than I was ready to admit. And the most disturbing part? The next morning she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me lightly, chatted about how swamped she'd been at work, and even asked what I felt like eating for dinner. Just like that. As if the night before didn't exist. It felt like I was trapped in a twisted version of my life. Everything around me looked the same, but none of it felt real anymore. I wanted to confront her so badly. Every part of me was screaming to just ask Amanda straight up, to demand an explanation for what I'd seen. But every time I tried to form the words, they just vanished. It was like they got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. Maybe it was fear fear that saying it out loud would make it all too real. Or maybe it was that last fragile piece of me still hoping, still praying that I'd somehow misunderstood everything. But I hadn't. The following week played out like some cruel rerun. Same script, different night. Mike and I ended up back at that same bar. I didn't really want to go, but some part of me needed to know if that first night was a fluke or part of something far worse. And there she was again. Same dance floor, same scene, but this time it wasn't the same guy. No, this guy was new, younger, probably late 20s, tall with a smug grin that rubbed me the wrong way the second I saw it. The kind of guy who walks into a room and acts like he owns it. I sat in that booth with Mike, gripping the table so tightly I could feel my fingertips go numb. It felt like I was watching some sick version of Deja Vu. Amanda was laughing, swaying to the music, letting this guy wrap his arm around her like they'd known each other for years. Every now and then she'd toss her hair over her shoulder and flash that smile, the one I used to think was just for me. But now it looked practiced. Empty. Like she was putting on a show. I didn't say a word to Mike. He probably didn't even notice how quiet I'd gotten, too caught up in whatever conversation he was having. Meanwhile, I was frozen in place, watching Amanda lean into this stranger, letting her hands rest on his chest in a way that made my stomach twist. And just like last time, she led him toward that hallway. I stood up, didn't even think about it. I just moved. But by the time I reached the hallway, that same security guy was already there, like he'd been waiting for me. Not again, he muttered, eyeing me like I was some kind of problem he didn't feel like dealing with. Listen, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though I felt anything but. That woman, she's my wife. I just want to know what's going on in that room. But he didn't budge. Told you before. Private room. No exceptions. My fists were clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to yell, to shove past him, to rip open that door and finally get the truth. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not with him standing there like a wall. So I did what I'd done the time before. I turned around and walked out. But this time it wasn't just the rage eating at me. It was something else, something colder. The realization that this wasn't a one-time thing. Amanda wasn't making a mistake. This was a routine. A habit. A double life she was living right under my nose. That drive home was brutal. I kept replaying the night in my head, asking myself the same questions on loop. How long had this been going on? How many men had there been? And how had she managed to keep it all hidden so easily? But the question that haunted me most was about that room. What exactly was happening in there? I couldn't keep doing this, couldn't keep watching from a distance, stuck outside the door while everything fell apart. I needed answers. And if I couldn't get them by asking, then I had to find another way. That's when I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I was going to confront her, not with words but with proof. No arguments, no denials, no running from the truth. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I made a plan. I called the bar ahead of time. The place had always seemed a little off, and I figured they probably offered more than just drinks and dancing. After a few vague questions and some back and forth, I found out what I'd suspected. They had private rooms you could rent for special entertainment. The same rooms Amanda had been vanishing into. That's when it clicked. I'd go to the bar, but not as myself. I'd cover my face, book one of those rooms, and wait. I didn't know exactly how it would play out, but I had to take that chance. I needed to see for myself. That night, I pulled on a simple black mask, one that covered everything but my eyes. My heart was pounding as I got ready, every part of me screaming that this was insane. But I couldn't back out. Not now. When I arrived, the same security guy was out front. But this time I didn't argue. I walked up, gave a different name, and told him I had a room booked for a private session. He barely glanced at me before stepping aside and letting me in. My hands were shaking as I followed a staff member down a dim hallway. The room they brought me to was small and dark, with a couch along one wall and a tiny table nearby. The air smelled like stale perfume and something else I couldn't quite place. I sat down in the corner, half hidden in the shadows, my mask tight against my skin. I didn't know what was going to happen next. But I knew one thing for sure. If Amanda walked through that door, everything would change. A few minutes later, the door opened with a soft creak. And there she was, Amanda. My wife. Walking into that dim room with the same confident stride I'd seen so many times before, only now it felt like I was seeing her for the first time. She had no idea it was me sitting there in the shadows. The woman I saw walk in wasn't the Amanda I knew from home. This version of her, this polished, composed performer, felt like a stranger. And it turned my stomach. She didn't hesitate. Not even for a second. She stepped inside, shut the door quietly behind her, and without saying a word began to undress. Slowly. Methodically. Like it was something she'd done countless times before. There was no shame. No hesitation. Just complete control. I sat there, frozen, every second carving a deeper scar into my chest. She started moving toward me, her eyes half-lidded, completely immersed in what she thought was a performance for another faceless man. She had no idea it was her husband sitting there, watching her every move, heart-breaking with each step she took. As the music thumped faintly through the walls, she danced just like I'd seen her do from afar. She got close, too close, and when she finally finished she moved toward me, dressed in nothing but a lacy outfit meant to entice. She climbed onto the couch, slowly, her hands resting lightly on my knees, leaning forward like she was ready to take it further. That's when I stopped her. I stood up. My heart was pounding so loudly it nearly drowned out everything else. With trembling hands I reached up and pulled the mask from my face. The moment she saw me, really saw me, her entire body froze. Her expression didn't shift gradually, it collapsed. Eyes wide, lips parted, no words. Just shock. Pure raw disbelief. I didn't yell. Didn't raise my voice. I looked her in the eye, letting the weight of everything I felt hang between us. "Well, Amanda," I said, my voice low and cold, "this ends right here. I've seen enough. I know what you've been doing. I just hope, somewhere in all this, you still feel even a little bit of shame." She stood there, pale and silent, her mouth slightly open but nothing coming out. For once she had no story, no defense. Just silence. The truth lingered in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. I turned and walked out. I didn't need to hear whatever excuse she would try to muster. I didn't want an explanation. I had all the answers I needed. Stepping out of that bar into the cold air, I felt like I'd been hit by a train. I could barely breathe. My chest was tight, my legs felt like they were carrying someone else's weight. The sounds from inside, the music, the voices, faded into nothing. All I could feel was the truth settling in. She'd been living another life. One that didn't include me. A life I didn't even recognize. Walking away from her, leaving her standing there, exposed and speechless, it should have brought some kind of closure. But it didn't make the pain disappear. Just made it real. I got in my car and sat there, staring at the dashboard, lost. I couldn't bring myself to start the engine. Not yet. I didn't know what was waiting for me at home. Would Amanda show up? Would she try to explain? Or would she vanish into the night, avoiding everything like she had been all along? The thought of facing her again made my stomach turn. So I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the wheel, lost in a loop of every memory, every question. How long had she been doing this? With how many men? Was there something deeper that I didn't know? That look on her face when I unmasked, was it fear? Guilt? Or just surprise at getting caught? Eventually I drove home. The house felt empty even before I opened the door. As I walked in, the silence greeted me like a punch to the chest. No lights. No Amanda. Just the hollow echo of everything I thought we were. I half expected to see her waiting for me, maybe trying to explain or justify everything. Or maybe she'd be gone already. But the silence, God, that silence, it was worse than any confrontation. It was avoidance. It was the same evasion I'd been feeling for months, now turned up to a deafening volume. I couldn't sit down. Couldn't lie in our bed. I paced. I wandered. Every room felt like a lie. Every photo on the wall, every item we shared, it all mocked me like a museum of something that had never truly existed. And then hours later, I heard the front door creak open. Amanda walked in, quiet as a ghost. Her face was pale. Her eyes red and swollen, like she'd been crying the whole way home. She barely met my gaze. And for the first time since we met, I didn't recognize her. She wasn't the woman I married. She wasn't even someone I knew. Just a stranger who had worn my wife's face. We stood there, the two of us frozen in silence, the air between us thick with everything that had gone unsaid for far too long. Amanda opened her mouth once, like she was about to speak, but the words never came. I wasn't going to rescue her from the moment. I wasn't going to ask why, or how long. I just waited, quiet, steady, giving her a chance to tell the truth. Eventually she whispered, "I never thought you'd actually find out." That was all. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet confession that this entire thing had only gone wrong because she got caught. That stung more than anything else. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, just sorry that her secret life had finally collapsed around her. I felt something in my chest tighten, and before I could stop myself, the words escaped. "How long, Amanda?" Her eyes welled up, but she didn't answer. She didn't have to. That silence, it told me everything. My hands balled into fists as I fought to stay calm. How long have you been lying to me? How many nights did you go there? How many men? Her body shook slightly and she stared at the floor. It's not what it looks like, she said, her voice cracking. Even now, after everything, she was still trying to rewrite the story. Still trying to paint herself as something other than the villain in this mess. You think I don't know? I said, louder now, unable to contain it. I saw it, Amanda. I was there. I watched you. You undressed for someone you thought was just another guy in the crowd. You were about to. I had to stop, the words catching in my throat. You were going to go through with it, weren't you? She finally looked up at me, tears running freely now. I never meant for it to get this far, she whispered. That was all she had to offer. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. I turned away, my mind spinning, every moment I'd questioned, every doubt I'd ignored, crashing down at once. All the time she kissed me goodbye. Every, I love you. Every fake smile after a late night out. I saw it all for what it really was. The days that followed were a blur. I moved through them like a man wandering through wreckage, trying to figure out what was salvageable, even though deep down I already knew, nothing was. Whatever we had, whatever we were, it was already gone. There was no need for a dramatic farewell. Amanda knew what was coming. The look in her eyes told me she could already see the end. I think the shock of being caught so suddenly still hadn't fully left her. Everything she had built on lies came crashing down in a single, unguarded moment. The next morning, I contacted a divorce attorney. I couldn't wait around anymore, hoping for some kind of healing. We had been married for almost a decade, but now it felt like most of that time had been lived in shadows. Now I just needed to pull myself free from the tangle of her choices. The divorce process blurred past like static. You'd think I'd be ready to be done with it, to rip the bandage off, but it wasn't that easy. It's one thing to know your marriage is over, it's another to put your name on a line and make it final. Signing those papers felt like sealing the lid on a version of my life I once believed in. Amanda didn't put up a fight. She went along with it quietly. But even in her silence, I could tell she wasn't as strong as she was pretending to be. I saw the cracks, her trembling hands, the way she kept swallowing hard when she thought no one was watching. She wore a mask of control, but underneath it she was unraveling. She wasn't the Amanda I thought I married. Or maybe I was finally seeing who she truly was all along. During one of our final meetings, we sat across from each other in a lawyer's office, going over the last details. She kept her head up, her voice calm. But I saw her eyes, glassy, distant. Do you have anything to say, Amanda? I asked quietly, needing to ask it just once. She looked at me, her lips trembling just a little. There was a flicker of something, remorse maybe, but she swallowed it down. No, she said softly. There's nothing left to say. And just like that, it ended. No apology. No final truth. Just silence. You'd think I'd be furious or feel some kind of closure. But all I felt was empty. Hollow. Like I'd lost something I never really had. The day the divorce was finalized, we both showed up to the courthouse. Amanda looked as polished as ever, calm, composed, like she hadn't just watched her marriage disintegrate. But I'd seen too much. I knew what lived behind that calm exterior. And I knew I could never look at her the same way again. We didn't say much that day. Just sat there in that courtroom, side by side but worlds apart, as the judge read through the final motions. It felt like the space between us was endless, this invisible canyon that had taken years to form. Only now I could finally see it for what it was. And when it was over, when the judge declared it official, Amanda stood up without a word and walked out of the room. She didn't glance back. She didn't need to. I watched her leave, and for the first time it hit me, this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the collapse of an entire chapter of my life. All those memories, all those little moments that once felt sacred, they were all tainted now. Everything we built, every promise, every laugh felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone who never really existed. After the divorce we didn't talk. We didn't need to. There wasn't anything left that words could fix. The silence between us said more than any argument ever could. And that silence? It followed me. Lingered. Even though the paperwork was done and the marriage was officially behind me, I couldn't shake the damage. I was out of the storm, sure, but I was still soaked to the bone. My friends told me it was time to celebrate. That this was freedom and I should treat it like a second chance. They made it sound like I had just been let out of some long sentence. And maybe in some ways they were right. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like standing at the edge of something unfamiliar and not knowing where to go next. Mike, the guy who had been there through all of it, was the one who pushed hardest. He said I needed to go out, have a few drinks, reset. Just one night to feel like myself again, or someone new. I wasn't sure I had it in me, but I agreed. A few nights later, Mike and a couple of the old crew took me out to one of our usual haunts, someplace far from the one I'd caught Amanda in. That place was poison to me now. No, this one was different. Quieter. Familiar. The kind of bar we used to visit before life got messy. As soon as we walked in, I was hit by the noise, the warmth, the smell of beer and conversation. It felt like the world had just kept turning while mine had been stuck in rewind. Mike clapped me on the back with a grin that was almost too wide. "This is your night, man. Fresh start. Forget the past." I tried to smile, but it barely made it past my lips. I didn't feel like I was celebrating anything. I felt like I'd buried something. And I didn't know what to do with the hole it left behind. Still, I played along. I knocked back my first drink faster than I probably should have, just to feel something different. The burn helped. For a moment. The guys were hyped, joking around, making toasts, handing out advice I didn't ask for. They said things like, "You're back in the game," and "Time to meet someone better." But the idea of dating again felt alien to me. I could barely make sense of my own head, let alone imagine opening up to someone else. But I nodded. I laughed when I was supposed to. I let the night blur a little. Maybe I hoped the drinks would wash some of it away. At one point, Mike leaned over, already well into his own buzz. "Amanda was holding you back, man. One day you'll see, this was the best thing that could have happened to you." I didn't respond. What could I say? Maybe he was right. Maybe one day I'd believe that. But right then, standing in that bar with a drink in my hand and my marriage in ruins, I didn't feel like someone who had been set free. I felt like someone who had been gutted. The night went on. The laughter got louder. For a few hours, I almost forgot how broken everything felt. Then, out of nowhere, the bartender slid a shot glass in front of me. "This one's on the house," she said with a smile. "Heard you're fresh off a divorce. Figured you could use it." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because somehow even strangers could feel the weight on my shoulders. I downed the shot, let it sting on the way down. And for the first time that night, I felt just a little lighter. Like maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. We stayed late. We drank more. We laughed like the past couldn't touch us. And for a few fleeting hours, I forgot about the betrayal, the lies, the mask Amanda wore for all those years. I forgot about how I'd lost someone I never really knew. But deep down, beneath the drinks and the noise and the forced smiles, I knew that the pain didn't end when the music stopped. It would be there, waiting for me the next morning. Waiting in the quiet. Still, in that moment, I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Fragile and uncertain, sure. But it was there. And that was enough to get me through the night. We stayed at the bar until closing, and by the time we stumbled outside into the cool night air, the buzz in my head was strong, but not strong enough to make me forget. Not all the way. Mike slung his arm around my shoulder, grinning with that half-drunk sincerity only a close friend can pull off. "This is it, man. A fresh start. You're gonna be okay." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it yet. But for that moment, standing there with my friends and the taste of whiskey still burning down my throat, I let myself believe he might be right. The days after that night were quieter than I expected. It was like everything had finally slowed down, giving me space to breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. The divorce was done. The dust had settled. The chaos Amanda brought into my life had finally stopped. That doesn't mean the pain vanished. I still had those mornings where I'd wake up and for a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then it would hit me all over again, the lies, the betrayal, the realization that the woman I thought I knew had been living a life I never even saw coming. But something strange started to happen after a while. I began to care less. It started small. I'd come home and realize that I wasn't carrying that familiar weight on my chest anymore. I wasn't wondering where Amanda was, or who she might be with. That knot of dread that used to live in my gut? It was unraveling. I could breathe again. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped imagining what she was up to. It was like she was slowly fading, slipping out of focus. Just a chapter I'd already read, one I didn't need to open again. And then came the moment I knew I'd turned a corner. Mike called me one afternoon, his voice carrying that familiar mix of curiosity and disbelief. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. "Amanda's still working at that bar. Same place. Same routine." I let it hang there for a second. A few months ago that would have felt like a gut punch. But now, I just let out a breath and said, "Doesn't matter." Mike was quiet for a beat. "Seriously? That doesn't bother you?" I shrugged, even though he couldn't see it. "It used to. But she's not my problem anymore." And I meant it. I had spent so long drowning in the lies, the confusion, the heartbreak that I forgot what it felt like to focus on myself. That call from Mike? It reminded me just how far I'd come. Amanda could keep living that life, keep dancing behind closed doors and pretending it meant nothing, but it had nothing to do with me now. I was finally free. I didn't have to watch from a distance anymore. I didn't have to search for answers or wonder what she was hiding. That life, that pain, it was all behind me. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking back. That was the moment I knew I'd let her go. So that's it. That's the story. I don't know what else there is to say except this: if you're going through something like this, if it feels like your world is crashing down around you, if you're stuck in that dark place thinking you'll never move on, you will. It won't happen overnight. But it'll happen. One morning you'll wake up and the weight will be lighter. You'll start to breathe easier. And one day you'll wonder how something that once felt so permanent ever held you down at all. As for me, Amanda's part of my past now. A hard lesson but a necessary one. And the road ahead? I don't know exactly where it leads. But I'm finally ready to find out. Thanks for listening. Writing this all down, it helped. And if it helps someone else, if it makes even one person feel a little less alone, then maybe that's the one good thing that came out of all this. Here's to whatever comes next.